including some on the wind market. And also, I think it's important to understand that we're making a big investment for Korea, and we're in the process of setting up an office in Seoul at the moment. So due to COVID, which I'm sure will be a topic for today, obviously we've been delayed a little bit, but James Taylor has now joined us as country manager, and he'll be out there soon. So I think that's probably enough background about us. So I'll be now introducing our speakers. We've got a very strong lineup today. So I'll do my best to just give a brief introduction to each, and then they can maybe add to that as we go. So I believe the first speaker for today is Jørgen Krag from EKF. He's the head of offshore wind and project finance at EKF, and brings 15 years of experience in project finance and offshore wind around the world. So please come on. I'm going to be presenting about financing offshore wind. Over to you, Jørgen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak here today. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope you're all safe in these special times. I have a presentation today, which will take 10 minutes, where I would like to explain what EKF do, and how we participate in financing, and how we see the market in Asia. I'll start uploading the presentation now, so just a second. Yes, I hope you can see the presentation now. First, EKF is the Danish Export Credit Agency, and what we do is that we finance Danish export. So we can finance wind farms when there's a Danish economic interest in that. And it means if you're using Vestas turbines or MSI Vestas in offshore, or Siemens Gamesa turbines, then EKF can finance the wind farm together with commercial bank. And EKF is the Danish Export Credit Agency, and we are owned by the Danish government. So we are a government institution providing financing. We have a rating of AAA, and what we do is we provide debt or guarantee to the financing. If you look at our books, then more than 73% of our exposure is related to the wind sector. So the wind is very much dominating EKF and our exposure, and it is our core business today. And if you split that up between offshore and onshore, then I will say that 60% is offshore and 40% is onshore. So it is a very big business. And when it comes to number of deals, the onshore do more deals than do offshore. If we look at our track record, then we have project finance more than 23 offshore wind deals, and we started 15 years ago in 2006, and has almost been doing offshore deals ever since. And in the beginning, we were very nervous on could these turbines stand out there in the water for so long, and how was the risk, and we had a repayment of 15 years, and will they last so long? But the track record for us has been very good, and we have not experienced any loss in the offshore wind sector. So we are very happy about this sector in EKF. And in 2018 we started finance our first wind farm outside Europe, and that was in Taiwan in 2018. Before that, all the wind farms was in Europe, and then in Taiwan we have now closed 4 deals and see a big market there going forward. So we are definitely open for business outside Europe. If we look at the offshore market, then there are installed more than 22 gigawatt globally, and we have participated in 6.6 gigawatt of these wind farms. And here I exclude mainland China. And we have also financed almost 5 gigawatt, which are under construction now. So totally EKF has participated in more than 11 gigawatt. If we look at the onshore market and how we see that, then Vietnam is definitely a booming market for us on the onshore side. And it's structures where we have bank guarantees, and we are doing the financing together with a local bank. And it's my colleague Henrik Brink, who is working almost 100% of his time on doing onshore wind deals in Vietnam right now, and he has a very big pipeline there. We don't see project finance yet in Vietnam, but we definitely hope that we can do that going forward. Other countries we have been active in the past in Asia is South Korea and the Philippines and India, and then also Australia has been a very big market for us. So Asia is definitely a market where we see transactions and are doing transactions. If we look at the offshore market and how we see it, then it's going from a business in Europe to be a global business, and definitely Asia is taking off first here as a leader in moving towards offshore wind. And we see a lot of activities in Japan, Korea, and also in Vietnam. And we also hear of some projects in India and Australia. Mainland China, we don't see any deals there. I know there's a big boom in mainland China, but it's mostly local turbines, and they do the financing themselves, so they don't go for international financing. Taiwan is naturally very important for us, and we see a big pipeline there and have closed 4 deals there. If we look at financing and how we typically participate in financing, then it's typically club deals when it comes to offshore wind, and it is very much risk sharing together with commercial banks and international banks and ECAs. In many deals, the total investment is $2 to $3 billion US dollars. So there's a lot of debt which has to be financed in offshore, and it means that there's a lot of room for different parties in doing the financing. Typically, we have also cooperated with other ECAs in the export credit area and are doing that on deals depending on where the sourcing is coming from to the wind farm. So we have a big cooperation with other countries in doing the financing. EKF participation is in the area of typically $500 million US dollars on a single project. We can go higher because we have a lot of reinsurance in place and can add capacity depending on the structure. If we look at the risk we saw when we went to Asia doing offshore wind financing, then there was some new risks which we have not been handling or looking at in Europe before, and that was risk like earthquake and typhoons and pink Chinese dolphins in the water between mainland China and Taiwan. And there was a country which was different compared to doing an offshore wind deal in Germany or UK or Belgium or Holland. And then the PPA, which was very different compared to the very long form we see in Europe. But to do an offshore deal in Asia, you have to understand these risks and try to mitigate them as good as possible. And therefore, it's very important that there's participants from both local banks and international banks and the ECAs like us. And it had worked very well in Taiwan, and I assume that the same could happen in Japan and Korea and Vietnam. If we look at the due diligence, then it's standard due diligence in doing project finance. EKF can do both. We can do corporate risk where there is a guarantee from a strong sponsors and the bank guarantee structures, which we are doing on onshore deals in Vietnam at the moment. And then on project finance, the due diligence becomes very important, and that we need some advisors together with the commercial banks to understand the risk. And that's why we have these due diligence reports about the legal risk, the technical risk, and insurance and environment. I think that was a very short introduction to EKF and how we participate in offshore wind financing, and I hope you get an impression that we are very keen to do business in Asia, and we see it as very strategic and important that we are opening up new markets like Korea and Vietnam and Japan. I think that was very short for me and my presentation, and then back to Robin.
Thank you, Jorgen. Very nice overview then. Yeah, I think I speak for many when I say we're glad to see EKF on the scene here. So thanks for that overview. Okay, I think for the next presentation, maybe you can start sharing the screen. So we have EVN PEC 3. So Mr. Ngo Kien Chuong, who's the project director for the Thang Long offshore wind project. He's also the deputy director of thermal power and renewable energy at PEC 3 and brings 26 years of experience in power projects. He'll also be presenting with Mr. Chaluka Ekanayaka, who has spent the last 10 years working on construction in a variety of projects in the roles of construction manager, project manager, team leader, and he's now the deputy project director of the Thang Long project. So the presentation is going to be about the Thang Long offshore wind power project. So over to you.
Yeah, let me share my screen first. Good afternoon, everyone from Vietnam. On behalf of the PCC3, actually we are going to share with you some basic information about Vietnam, future wind power in Vietnam. Shall I continue?
Yes, I can. And I say, hell, everything is perfect, no problem now. You can go to the next slide.
Yes, I would like to pay your attention to the first chart, which is about the future. And as you can see in the chart, this would be the wind power in Asia by end of 2030. In this, Vietnam also has to contribute certain capacities, and this is a challenge for Vietnam. So, as you all are aware about that, developing a huge wind farm is a challenge as far as investors and the financiers are concerned. Then Vietnam has really understood this in advance, and Vietnamese government has taken various steps and measures to meet this target as much as possible. As a result, Vietnamese government very recently passed its PPP law. Actually, this is a very good legal instrument to provide a very safe working environment for the foreign developers in the country. And the next thing is Vietnamese government again has developed a guideline called Wind Power Investment Guideline. This guideline provides very detailed, step-by-step detail in terms of procedural and regulatory requirements to develop wind power from beginning to end. That will be a very useful tool for any newcomer into Vietnam to start a project and go ahead. At the same time, Vietnamese government approved 7 gigawatt wind power projects June in this year. And also not only that, it has planned to develop 12 gigawatt wind power projects by the end of 2025. Not only that, Vietnamese government has supported for various developers to develop their wind projects, and there are almost 500 megawatt wind power projects in pipeline. Those will be in reality by end of 2025. That means those will be in more developed stage. And at the moment, Vietnamese government is planning to publish its National Power Development Plan number 8, which is a very useful stage in terms of power development in the country. For sure that number 8, NPDP number 8 will include many wind power projects in terms of offshore and onshore. And Vietnam government is planning to include or develop renewable energy at the percentage of 10% of its total wind capacity by the end of 2030. And in addition to that, government is so interested in renewable energy sector because the Vietnamese government has committed to align with the Paris Convention to reduce greenhouse energy in the country, and the government has introduced new laws and the policies to meet this target. Support the convention, the Paris Convention. And when we talk about the wind energy potential in the country, Vietnam is considered to be a country in the Asia having a higher wind capacity in terms of nearshore, onshore, and offshore all. And it has average annual wind speed as you can see in the screen, 9 to 10 miles per second. The most importantly, Vietnam has the long coastline, which is around 3,000 kilometers long. In that line, from central part to southern part, has more wind power potential compared to the north part. And Vietnam also having offshore in two, we can categorize into two as fixed foundation and floating foundation. You can see in the screen, in fixed foundation, which is below 50 meter seabed, 621 gigawatts, and floating capacity maybe 214 megawatts. And when it comes to the onshore is having a huge capacity. It is around 2,100 gigawatt capacity. That capacity is extended in 200,000 square kilometer land stem. That is another feature that we have enough land to develop wind power in onshore wind power in Vietnam. That will help to reduce the cost also because we have free lands. So these are the possibilities and the potential in Vietnam to develop wind power in future. So I hope this information I give you sufficient, but I same time share with my colleague Mr. Kung. He will continue the rest.
Thưa quý vị và Jackson, Yes, I like to introduce to you last 4 items. The first one is local infrastructure and logistics facility in Vietnam. And the second is local supplier available in Vietnam. And then it's potential local consultant. It's the last experience of such consultant. Now I would like to come to the local infrastructure and logistics facility in Vietnam. We coming to in support system is with ambition to level rising population distribution in Vietnam as well as promote economic growing up in Vietnam. In Vietnam have been Vietnam as the investigation been is a lot of port along the coastline of Vietnam, in which we have a 10 at this port. The first is Quảng Ninh from the north, number 1, and the second is Hai Phong port. Cửa Lò, Chân Mây, Đà Nẵng, Southern is the biggest one is like one port and Vũng Tàu. With the distribution, we think that we understand that the potential, the wind power in Vietnam is in highland Vietnam and the central and the south coastline of Vietnam and offshore. So with the distribution of support, we can optimize the transport plan. About transportation inland, the road network in Vietnam have connected on to the key location of the country. With the standards that road even is we understand that the most potential in the wind power Vietnam is in the central of Vietnam and in highland and the coastline of southern Vietnam. With the transportation in the national road number 1, which along the country is sufficient for transporting wind turbine components, especially we transporting the turbine blades. But in the highland, here is one issue. There are some cases turbine capacity we have to limit due to transport issue in highland area. Thus, we have to pass some pass mountain to the highland. For example, we transport from Nha Trang to the highland, and we transport from between to the Nha Trang. We have to pass over some mountain passing. So we should have a thorough survey in the transportation condition to the highland or determine the turbine size. About our logistic facility, available local logistic agency and transportation, and bring facility for the wind turbine component. About transmit system, just in power system is the big issue. So many investors concerned about that. Now, this Ministry of Industry and Trade (MOIT) has taken initiative to put in place the transmission line system to meet the country for demand with a vision to 2045. Of course, this time the offshore wind project are being analyzed for the inclusion in national power development number 8. How with the emission to indicate all the renewable energy from the power plant to the load demand center in the north and the south. Now we are coming to the local supplier. Of course, in Vietnam is since from open market Vietnam is we have a sovereign construction company. Yes, many local company located their workshop close to the port with a sufficient enough space for with a facility to fabricating steel structure for onshore and offshore wind power. For example, in the tower for the turbine and the foundation steel structure for offshore turbine. From Blooming's time is up to now, it's many local company. We already obtained installation experience from onshore and nearshore project. That's been the first one project VinPearl project in Vietnam province and Ninh Thuận, and then it's Quảng Trị province. About offshore wind. Offshore wind is now is the beginning stage of Vietnam. We can set it in advanced states. But there are several companies like Petro Vietnam and few other got experience from the offshore business and offshore operation. We can have some different like Lilama, Petroleum, BBC, MS, and PSPC, and power construction company in especially and also Dusan, Vietnam. They have the ability to do fabricating for steel structure for the wind project, the tower, and the foundation. Yes, about the consultant. Yes, in Vietnam we have 4 consultants belong to EVN with long experience. One of them is the BC3 with 40-year development and operation experience. We can provide professional consultant service for the power system project, renewable energy, thermal power, power transmission line, hydropower, environment, and investigation. Of course, now it's green power. PAC3 is we are proud. We are pioneer consultant service in Vietnam for development of VinPearl project. With postgraduates, it's about 31 person, and engineer and bachelor about more than 300 person. With various field specialists. Of course, especially we can provide full range of consultant service from the preliminary stage development and implementation, of course, construction, as well as help the developer provide the tender and contract EPC negotiation. Our experience is that we can have provided consultant service for about the green needs we since 2012. Recently, 23 onshore wind project with total capacity more than 1,400 megawatt. Now we are ongoing project is Thăng Long wind project. We are proud of this project. This investor from the UK is Enterprise Energy. We are consultant service with a full range consultant service for this project from the development stage until the construction stage. This project is located in Vietnam province, 15 kilometers from Kegai Cape, with total capacity 3,400. For our detail, which you can go to website is battery.com. Yeah, we invite openly to own potential development to join with and develop VinPearl project in Vietnam. We are confident that this whole will develop VinPearl project will have a bright future in Vietnam. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Sorry, just finding my video again.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. Okay, thank you. So again, I'll invite you to move the sharing screens, and I'll introduce the next presenter. So we have William Gaillard from Vestas, who's the VP for sales in Asia Pacific. Previously was working for Siemens Gamesa as head of regional sales for Southeast Asia, and is bringing 15 years of experience across various industries globally. So he's going to be presenting on supporting Asia's renewable energy growth. So over to you, William.
Thanks, Robin. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, I'm William from Vestas here in Singapore, where we have our HQ for Asia Pacific. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about Vestas in Asia and how we see the market in Asia and how we intend to support the market growth in Asia over hopefully the next decade of tremendous demand for energy and hopefully as much renewable as possible. So at Vestas, every business meeting starts with safety, and so this webinar is part of that kind of things. I don't want to spend too much time on, but it's just for you to know that safety is our main priority. Nothing can be done if it's not done in a safely manner. So I hope you're all safe here, and that's why also we are using this webinar form today. Of course, COVID-19 is going to probably be one of the topics we're going to talk also later. And for us, it has been obviously very much challenging to continue operating and ensuring energy supply to the grid during those circumstances. But thanks to really a fantastic focus and fantastic dedication from all our teams, we've done that extremely successfully, and so we're very happy with also our results on that side. Don't want to spend too much time on Vestas, just in case you don't know us. We're the leader worldwide, and we've got a very much global presence. We're present in more than 80 countries, and we have facilities and manufacturing facilities and R&D warehouses, etc., pretty much everywhere in the world. When we look at where we are in Asia, excluding China and India, which we are very much present, but just to focus on Asia, we have wind farms in Mongolia, we have wind farms in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, obviously South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and also Southeast Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Philippines. About 2 gigawatts already installed and more than 1.2 gigawatt under construction. A good part of it is Vietnam, so obviously it's very much our focus. And we are also servicing more than 2 gigawatt of installed turbines. So most of what we have installed is under our servicing, and we also service other brands with customers who trust us in performing a better job than the original equipment manufacturer. When we look at the renewable growth over the next 30 years, that's WoodMac or Bloomberg numbers, you see that most of the growth will come from Asia Pacific. So obviously this is an important area for Vestas to focus. And out of this, we expect wind to play quite a big role actually. Those numbers might be outdated, but still we see that solar might take maybe a slightly bigger share of the pie, and it's very exciting to see that solar is now becoming also mainstream and very successful. But wind is also becoming mainstream and successful, and with the potential in Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia for wind, there is no doubt that this would be a big part of what will help replacing coal and other thermal power plants. If I also try to, and that's, you can see that it's mainly onshore, but there are a few numbers also for offshore there. You can see that in Asia, it's Japan, which is one of the largest country or largest installed base with 4 gigawatt already installed. Japan is, of course, a very important market for us. I'm not going to elaborate too much on Japan today because it's a stable market. There are regulations and the permitting process is clear and etc. So I'm sure that everyone knows how Japan is important in that space and in the wind industry for Asia. Thailand has been a great market for us also and has built 1.5 gigawatts. and is placed second. It's unfortunate that now, since I think 2012, there is no PPA, new PPA that have been given, and unfortunately for wind, and that means that now there is now absolutely nothing in the pipeline, and we hope that the future governments in Thailand are going to change that. Then Pakistan also has been quite a good market over the last years. It's preparing for auctions next year, hopefully. So we're going to see there also some important growth. South Korea started very early stage, and the oldest turbine we have installed there, I think, is now 17 or 18 years old. So obviously for us it's an important market. We've got more than half of the 1.2 gigawatt installed is Vestas, and it's a great market for us. But unfortunately, and I'm going to elaborate a bit more on that, there are some challenges as we speak. Taiwan has been a great market onshore. Offshore, obviously the install base is yet to come. It is in process of being installed. So I know offshore is going to be a huge number in Taiwan very soon, but as we speak, onshore is still leading there. Philippines is a little bit the same situation as in Thailand. There has been a good few years, and then everything stopped with new regulation, and right now there's not much light at the end of the tunnel. It's still very much dark, unfortunately. Let's see if that changes in the future. And then Vietnam, which at the end of last year had less than 300 megawatt installed, but as we forecast, and I'm going to come to that very next, this is going to change very soon. This is changing as we speak very soon. And then a few other countries there, as you can see, very, very much opportunistic projects, and not really long-term strategy from the government, unfortunately, to support those projects, or that more projects come. So if we look at the market forecast, or how we see it, and how also others, Bloomberg New Energy Finance numbers here, reflect that, you can see that onshore is going to be pretty much, driving the wind growth over the next 5 years. And then offshore is being prepared to also take the relay. So onshore, Vietnam is going to play a big part of it. Taiwan is going to continue to deliver a little bit. Korea also quite stable with 250 megawatt a year. Japan also very, very predictable, long permitting process. But when you got the permits and you got the feed-in tariff, and you know when it's going to be built almost and taken over almost by the day and the hour it's going to be done. So very well organized. But then you've got the offshore, and you can see that offshore right now, of course, a big part of this installed is Taiwan, and some of it will be then supported by Japan, and Korea supposedly coming also online with a few demonstration projects 2023 onwards. And let's see, there are obviously lots of announcements from the Korean government, but at the moment it's more announcement stage than anything concrete to unfortunately enable this to happen. So talking about Korea, I think it's quite important to see that there is apparent willingness from the government to transition to renewable energy. There is this new 2020 plan from the government, has been re-elected recently, aggressive or ambitious plan. We unfortunately struggle to see how this will happen. And as we speak, there is actually a lot of challenges. And so it's an interesting market. There is a huge potential. As I said, already 1.2 gigawatt installed. There is a good resource. And they have to face coal, so there is a need for power, a clear need for power in Korea. But unfortunately, at the moment, well, the PPA prices are going down. We see also a lot of pressure from the government putting emphasis on the local turbine manufacturers, and obviously that is another bottleneck for our customers who cannot achieve the profitability for their projects with these turbines, and when they apply with Vestas turbine, they get declined. So as we speak, actually, there is nothing really being approved. The local governments are restricting permits. There's a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard, happening there. A lot of local protests. And this, I think, is where, you know, Korea could take a lot of lessons learned, for example, from the governments in Vietnam, where you see, on the contrary, the local provinces are extremely supportive and try to bring wind farms to their province to attract investment and raise the economy and create jobs, etc., etc. So in Korea, it's really very much the opposite. The environmental impact assessment approval is extremely complicated and unclear, no clear guidelines, unfortunately, very arbitrary how you get or not any approval. Approvals are also subject to being modified. So sometimes a 100 megawatt project become only 30 megawatt and kills the whole business plan just because, well, no one knows, but because the authority in charge of giving the approval is not happy. So yeah, and the grid, surprisingly, the grid in Korea, which is pretty strong and reliable grid, is not planning also for this expansion. And right now, just to get grid capacity, there is a few of 6 months to 2 years to apply before you even get the grid connection approval. So definitely lots of challenges. Nothing that could that you know, everything could be obviously. Or you could find solutions extremely easily. Lots of countries have found solutions for this exact same problem. But at the moment, as we speak, we don't see Korea taking that path of looking around what has been done and learning from the others, from lessons learned. So I hope that obviously this would change very soon. Looking at Vietnam, well, my dear colleagues, panelists here have already talked a bit about the market. Obviously, it's an attractive market. As we speak, there is maybe 2 gigawatt being under construction. So it is going to be a huge market, 2 to 2.5 gigawatt built by end of next year. There is an attractive feed-in tariff that makes the project viable and profitable with current local financing. But that's also one of the challenges. I think that everyone knows that the PPA is hardly bankable for foreign banks, and there are problems to you cannot do project financing as we speak, and that's limiting also. That will limit the growth in the future because of lack of foreign investment, but also because of lack of financing capabilities from the local bank, lack of liquidities on the market. Grid connection is very much a bottleneck with all those gigawatts that are being applied. Of course, the MOIT having approved another 7 gigawatt very recently with EVN, obviously, yeah, very in a very difficult position on how they would be able to connect all these. And there is a huge question mark of what's going to happen after November 2021 when the feed-in tariff deadline happens. No one has visibility, and that is obviously a big problem also for the investors at the moment who cannot proceed with continuing the development of their projects. But for us, it's it has been the second biggest market in terms of sales last quarter for Vestas, so extremely successful. We're going to have more than 1 gigawatt installed next year. We're doing some EPC, which is also showing our ability to really adapt to the market needs. And yes, we're obviously looking with our joint venture MHI Vestas at the potential offshore market for the Tanlong project as one of them. And this is just also for you to see the quality of projects that we are working on at the moment and how active this market is. There are 3 main regions in Vietnam: north, the provinces of Quang Tri, for example, and the center of Vietnam with Ninh Thuan, Vinh Phan, and then the south, Mekong Delta region with all the 1,000 provinces of Tra Vinh, Soc Pon, Bac Kia, Ben Tre, etc., etc. So yeah, very much unlocking here foreign investment into those provinces and help with community projects and hiring local people. Lots of lots of good things happening, very, very positive, and very good support and collaboration from the local provinces and governments. And thank you very much for your attention. If you have any question, I'll be happy to look at the Q&A and answer them directly. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, William. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, we have two more presentations. So the next one will be from Christophe Bécouche from Acre Offshore Wind. So he's a senior engineer for marine operations and has 6 years of experience with installation of subsea equipment. So yeah, please jump in, and he'll be presenting about key challenges for the planning of O&M.
Thank you, Robin. Can you see my screen and hear me loud and clear?
Yes, yes.
Perfect from my side, yeah.
Good. Well, it's a pleasure to be online with you today. My name is Christophe. I come from a small village in south of France and moved to Norway 6 years ago to start working as a subsea engineer. So I have worked with various projects, planning offshore operations, writing installation procedures, and going on board large construction vessels, following up the jobs. So most of my wind experience comes from the construction of the Hywind Scotland Pilot Park. And after that, I joined the Aker Group to support Aker entering the wind market. So today I'm going to talk about the key challenges for planning of operations and maintenance in floating wind. So today I'm representing Aker Offshore Wind, a young, pure deep water wind developer. So by deep water, we mean anything more than 60 meters, which is not deep for oil and gas standards, but surely very deep for offshore wind standards. So we are building on technologies that have been developed and proven by the Aker Group over the last 5 decades in the oil and gas, but also building up on our ownership in Principal Power, which is a technology leader in floating wind. So we're a young developer, but we already have some projects in development, and we're planning to develop more than 500 megawatt of floating wind in Korea. So today's that's going to be a short 10 minutes presentation. So I'll try to keep it simple and illustrative. And the key challenges I want to address are predictive maintenance and digitalization, on-site heavy repairs, and tow-to-port. But before diving into those challenges, what do we mean by O&M in floating wind? So we have the planned maintenance, the daily routine of the operations of the wind farm, and the heavy repairs and equipment changes. So in the planned maintenance, we have to make sure that the turbine is up and running, that all the equipment in the tower and in the nacelles are working as they should. We're inspecting the platform equipment, the pumps that are shifting the water from tank to tank, checking the corrosion status, and we have to regularly inspect the mooring lines as well, which is pretty similar to what is being done on floating platforms in the oil and gas. When it comes to heavy maintenance, those activities require heavy, costly interventions and are not easy to plan. So I'll go back to this in a minute. But starting with predictive maintenance and how we can apply digitalization to minimize costs of operation. We have some studies ongoing between Aker Solutions and Cognite, which is a IT-focused company from the Aker Group, on building a twin model for a floating wind turbine and trying to catch all the data provided by the sensors on the nacelle, on the turbine, on the floater, in order to predict the maintenance and the failure modes. So we're aiming at better anticipations of the maintenance activities, minimize the intervention required on site and the and the offshore operations, as well as reduction of visual survey. When it comes to heavy repairs of components offshore, the main challenge is surely the motions when lifting from a floating vessel to the turbine, which is moving as well. So the picture that you can see on this slide is showing one of the largest heavy lift vessel lifting a blade more than 100 or 150 meter height. So a small motion on the hull of the vessel is impacting the motion of the crane tip by more than half a meter, even if the water is really calm. And this can be really challenging when trying to insert bolts into the flange of the hub, for example. So the challenge here is to develop a better motion compensation system for the crane, as well as good guiding systems when lifting in or out equipment. The weather windows for performing this type of activities are very, very short, as well as the vessel availability and cost that will make those operations challenging. So this type of intervention would be very relevant if many turbines will have to see some equipment repaired during the same campaign. If we have to intervene on only one unit, for example, then towing the floater back to port would be a good option. And that's very specific to floating wind, of course. So floating wind will have to develop some efficient disconnection systems for the moorings and the cable. And another challenge that we're targeting at the moment, we have one study with Aker Solutions being supported by the Carbon Trust and the Scottish government to develop a system that would keep the connect two array cables together when removing a floater from the array in order to maintain the power production for all the turbines placed after the unit being removed. So that's a work currently ongoing. And once the turbine is being brought back to port and the lifting operations have to start, the next question is what type of equipment we're using for lifting. So we can see that with the next generation of wind turbines, the lifting equipment will become bigger, less available, and more expensive to mobilize, which is usually not a big problem when you have to assemble 50 or 100 units. But if you're going back to shore for only one lift, this type of cost starts to be a bit problematic. So that's something we have to address, and that's an open challenge on the list. So this is my last slide, and I wanted to summarize the different scenarios that we see for heavy maintenance, on-site repair versus tow to port. So the philosophy will be very dependent on the number of repairs to be planned on the same campaign. So if we're looking at multiple repairs, on-site intervention would be relevant, while tow to port is good for isolated repair campaigns. The dynamics of the lift and the weather restrictions are one of the largest challenge when looking at offshore repair, and of course that's not relevant for tow to port. Availability and cost of vessel, that's something challenging for on-site repair, while tow to port is using only tugs or anchor handlers, which are easily found on the market. Port access will show some restrictions on tides, draft, possibly crane availability, and that's very depending on location. So I'm not expecting huge challenges there for the Korean or Japanese or Vietnamese markets, but that's something we have to address for other projects like we have in California, for example. And then the loss of power production is not relevant for on-site repair, but is something we're working on for the tow to port. That's it from me. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to answering the questions you may have, and looking forward to working closer with the Japan, Vietnamese, and Korean markets as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christophe. Very interesting. I'm seeing further Q&As coming in, so do please keep submitting, and we'll try and address them after. So we have one more presentation. So I'll invite Tony Kim Min Suok from KEPCO. He's a senior researcher, and his experience focuses on ocean data monitoring and storms, and then focusing in on offshore wind farms and environmental monitoring. And he'll be presenting on environmental monitoring and O&M preparations from social acceptance to LCOE. So Tony, over to you.
Okay. Hello everyone. I'm Tony Kim. I'll be introducing environmental monitoring and O&M preparations from social acceptance to LCOE. I'm a researcher at KEPCO Research Institute. First, I'll briefly talk about the company. It's a Korea Electric Power Corporation. We were founded in 1898, and we are T&D service provider, the transmission and distribution service provider, and we supply electricity to 23 million households nationwide. And it's a government invested company with paid-in capital about $3.5 billion. And we have the research workers, employees about 440, with our total workers about 22,000. I'll introduce research that we are carrying at KEPCO. History and parallel projects that we have. In 2011, I'll be mainly focused on the offshore wind farm. In 2011, there was master plan for 2.5 gigawatt project announced by the government. So KEPCO has installed 2 offshore met masts there. But just like William said, there's a big problem with consent and approval from the local government and the government, and with the stakeholders. Opposition from them, that hinders the development of offshore wind farm development, and so that was a bit late. So the master plan was introduced in 2011, but we have 60 megawatts of demonstration farm in 2019. So that took about 8 years. So in between, what we did, we made design bases. We did consent process for environmental monitoring, CMS, SCADA, suction bucket installation, all other technical terms that could reduce the LCOE of because people see it as uneconomic and it's not feasible. So we are trying to improve LCOE. And in 2017, government has announced Renewable Energy 3020 plan. So by year 2030, there will be 20% distribution of renewable energy to the total energy distribution. So that's the history of background of offshore wind farm in Korea. And the research that we do is resource assessment and siting, which led to the national roadmap for developing 2.5 gigawatts offshore wind power. Then wind farm design, we've set design basis. Then to reduce the installation cost, we did actually come up with the suction bucket offshore wind turbine foundation. So the basic technique is to, if you have the empty can stuck in the bottom, then it will, with the pressure difference and self-weight penetration, it will just sink into the bottom. But it's specifically for the Yellow Sea, where the bathymetry is silt, mainly silt and mud. So this type of technology reduces construction from 30 days to about 24 hours. So installation we have completed in Gunsan and Southwest, 2 wind turbines. The turbines you see on the left bottom is the one we have research wind turbine in Gunsan, and demonstration is another one. So we saw the cost reduction of $3 million per turbine, and it won the DFI Outstanding Project Award. Then another thing, of course, it's very costly to install the vessels because we don't have infrastructure, the heavy cranes. It's very expensive and costly. So what we are doing now is to develop multi-purpose mobile base where you could assemble all the parts in the port and carry it to the site for installation. Then you just put it there, and with the suction bucket technology, it will just sink in, and with control of water valves and stuff, it just sink in with self-weight. So we see this as a great breakthrough because it reduces the construction time from 40 days to about 3 days, and cost reduction of $0.8 million per turbine. So we almost completed the making of the MMB, and launch and field verification is scheduled in a few months. Then environmental monitoring. The main reason why it was hindered is because the reason why it was delayed is because there was big opposition from the people, from the stakeholders, the fishing industry, environmentalists. Because in Korea, the stakeholders, the fishermen, they get allotted area for their fishing. But if it's taken up by offshore wind farm, then they'll have no place to do their business. So and some of the people say that it has negative impact on the surrounding. So we are trying to prove and investigate on whether the offshore wind farm has negative impact. So what we've done the research from 2016, and it's ongoing, and we are trying to monitor to reduce risks and social costs. And this is the platform that we have installed. It has radar, CCTV surveillance, ocean buoy, and monitoring system. So the results that we had from here was to prove that scoring, the range of scoring, underwater noise, impact on fish growth, and marine life tracking. So we are trying to see in general that offshore wind farm doesn't have negative impact on the surrounding area. Then social acceptance. Like I've been saying, there is a big technical development gap between the technology development rate and social acceptance. That's why people are saying no to the development of offshore wind farm. So what we have come up with is co-location of fisheries and offshore wind farm. Typically, in offshore wind farm, the fishing activities are prohibited, but we are trying to find the ways to coexist with the fishing industry so that they can do fishing, aquaculture, and other business inside offshore wind farm. So we had the experiment with artificial reefs placed. So you can see the layouts, and with these layouts, we had results. As you can see, the oysters and seaweeds, and we've raised some of the products there. So is to create business model inside OWF for coexistence with the fishing industry. Then O&M strategy and plans. We've developed SCADA and condition monitoring system, which is certified by DNVGL, and we've finished field verification in onshore and offshore. Just like I said, there was a delayed period. So like during those periods, we've come up with these technologies to boost up when the time is ready. And in 2017, the government has announced the 30-20 plan, so renewable energy 30-20 plan. So I think it's time for us to really boost up with the development of offshore wind farm. So from my perspective, personally I'm a GIS analyst. So like I've come with, you can see it on the left side of the slide, the possible offshore wind farm sites, which is deep water, 60 to 200 meters depth. So as you can see, it's most of the sites are far from the coast, and the main reason is because near the coast there is a big opposition from the stakeholders and fishing industry. So we'll try to go to the far distant place where it's the opposition is quite less, and people can say, okay, we are not affected by the offshore wind farm. So I think the Korean market will target floating offshore wind farm in few years to come, and it will be focused on not only fixed bottom but floating and complex marine energy farm. And just like Christoph said, the ports, dock, installation vessels, the infrastructures are not yet ready in Korean market, and through like collaboration with other Asian markets, we could come up with solutions to reduce LCOE, because I think the biggest opportunity that European countries have is they have good supply chain with other European companies and countries. So like there's a big part in reducing LCOE. So if we could cooperate with other Asian markets, I think we'll be able to reduce LCOE. Then also on the right side of the slide, you can see the monitoring conceptual design, and I see it as an opportunity for making employments and other boosting up other industries, just like offshore engineering, monitoring, maritime traffic control, then vessel monitoring, and like fishing in the offshore wind farm, and other industries to come up with the offshore wind farm, so that in the future we could have a big market for offshore wind farm for everyone. So to increase social acceptance, and with big O&M market for companies to join in. So that was all for more from me. So I'll welcome any questions from the audience. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tony. Very interesting presentation as well. Lots of interesting presentations from everyone, actually, and I look forward to the Q&A session now. One question that's coming up a few times, which I maybe just deal with first, is regarding the slides. So I understand that slides are likely to be shared as long as the presenters are willing to do that. So yeah, just so that you know, I think most of the slides will be shared after the session. So yeah, so I think we have about half an hour to go now. So Brian, please do jump in if ever we're overrunning. But I'll just move straight into sort of panel discussion and questions. I also have the pleasure to introduce another panelist for the session, which is Tommaso Andreatta, who's the Indochina head representative of Intesa Sanpaolo, Italy's largest bank, and is also the chairman of the Green Growth Sector Committee and vice chairman of the European Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam. So actually, I'll probably start with you and maybe let you introduce yourself if you'd like to, but also sort of move straight into the first sort of question, which is regarding the FIT outlook for offshore wind in Vietnam. I mean, are there any particular thoughts you could share on that to kick us off, Tommaso?
I have been in Vietnam for the last 12 years, and I had plenty of time to become acquainted with this market. The potential for energy investment at the moment is actually still very big. The demand for electricity keeps growing very fast. And yet, there are institutional and political issues that come as a little bit as a cold shower compared to the enthusiastic reports that we've heard until now. The government is in a phase of getting into the session of the Politburo, in which they will change the ranks of the government, and this is happening between November and March. And so it's going to be a phase of lethargy for decisions. Meanwhile, important decisions for energy have to be taken. The first one is the approval of the development plan number 8, which is, on the one hand, showing that the whole of the coast of Vietnam up to halfway to Hanoi could be covered by near-shore wind farms. And on the other hand, the knowledge that there is a strong competition of different sources of energy, and the government has not, the government and EVN have not firmly committed to any of these solutions. Wind does have the potential, the strong potential of not having a lot of land, and so developing wind offshore would be powerful, but at the moment there are no plans for real offshore, the one we've heard until now of 60 meters depth. So far, the only plans are for near shore, much less deep and much more into the way of fishing, of near coastal navigation and interaction with society on the coast. The FIT is quite attractive as it is at the moment, but it's the plan will finish next year, and the time taken for developing a wind farm, especially offshore, is longer than that. And that is why until now we have seen a few projects happening. And at the moment we are seeing everyone fumbling a little bit and waiting to see what is going to happen. The feeling is that it is possible, there is a lot of pressure on the new FIT not to be prolonged for 2 years or more, as we are advocating together with GWEC, with the Vietnam Business Forum in Hanoi. But instead, we will wait for auctions, which of course are going to go through pilot projects and going to take a lot of time before they become active. So the fear that we're going to have a hiatus between now and the time the market will open again. And what has happened with COVID, which has been promised as a topic but not actually touched, is that the hit to logistics has further slowed down the movement of materials and of people towards Vietnam, and has further slowed down the completion and development of plants and the works for future plants. So we invite anyone who has influence in Hanoi to actually band together and make clear to the government about the strong option of allowing wind onshore and offshore to be one of the driving forces for Vietnam energy in the near future. As a banker, I saw one of the questions saying the PPA is bankable or not. As a banker, my colleagues in headquarters say the way the current PPA is written, it is non-bankable. We do not even start looking at projects. I know international institutions, especially non-banks, have tried very hard and in few cases have supported projects, but I see it more as an exception rather than as a rule. Something needs to be done to improve the quality of the contracts between EVN and the market participants. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that very complete roundup. Actually, you're a little ahead of me on the questions, which is always useful. I think, yeah. I mean, I might just bring in the participants from PEC3 as well to maybe give some comments on similar topics. There was a particular point about the 12 gigawatt target by 2025. I mean, maybe Chaluka, if you can jump in. Do you think this is a realistic target? And if not, what can we actually expect to see, basically?
Sorry. Could you repeat again, please?
Sorry, yeah. So just generally commenting on Vietnam here, and just keen to get your thoughts. You mentioned that 12 gigawatts was the target for wind installations, I believe, for 2025. Just trying to understand whether you feel that this is a kind of realistic target or maybe a slightly ambitious one. Obviously, this was already touched upon a little bit in the previous answer, but just keen to get your thoughts as well.
Yeah, actually, this according to the government reports, this you mean 12 gigawatt capacity, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's targeting at the moment. I don't exactly don't see any much problems, but after that the COVID, we have to rethink again. But at the moment, it is planning likewise.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe William, maybe sort of bring you in a little bit on that, and maybe sort of broaden it out to the other countries as well, with Korea and Japan. Do you think that the COVID in particular is going to impact the targets, and sort of, are these targets going to be delayed, or do you think that we'll just sort of see a more or less a pick back up on the back of COVID? Obviously, there's a bit of black box uncertainty over when things will really go back to normal, but what are your thoughts, I guess, particularly from the perspective of Vestas, obviously supplying the market?
Yeah, thank you. Look, it was not easy, but we all survived, luckily. And I would say that despite the circumstances, we have been able to maintain business continuity fully. For example, our factories in Tianjin were closed for 2 to 3 weeks, went back from Chinese New Year due to the situation, and then it took us about a month to also get back to full speed, because we lost, unfortunately, also a lot of workers who were blocked in their own province and couldn't get back into Tianjin province, etc. But I'm happy to say that 3 months or 4 months after, now we have caught up with all the delay that we had in manufacturing. So we have not suffered really any impact at the moment on the deliveries. Hopefully, fingers crossed, nothing of that magnitude happens again. I think now we also have a lot more, we've learned a lot how to prevent. Even during the shutdown in India and Chennai facilities, we have also been able to ensure business continuity. We've been shipping lots of blades to the US when most of the factories were closed. So we have been actually leading, I would say, where lots of companies just took an approach where they would they would completely shut down. We could not afford to completely shut down, and we developed ways to ensure the business continuity and to work in a safe environment. So we have adapted all these processes. Now, obviously, there are bottlenecks. We had to also work very strongly with our subcontractors, gearboxes, etc. You know, they had to also learn to work the same way that we have developed. So that's really on the manufacturing side. On the execution side, we have also ensured fully all the maintenance of the turbines. There have been no downtime. We have also continued building projects. So, for example, in Taiwan, we recently completed one onshore project there, and we could not send anyone to Taiwan. So we had to do remote training. We had to also have people buy cameras, and some people would remotely help them when they were operating in the turbine to commission those turbines. So we have developed a lot of new ways, which I'm sure are going to be very helpful also and save on traveling and CO2 footprints in the future, etc. So there are lots of good learnings. Hopefully, when this goes away and we could go back to normal, there are still lots of good practices that we can use for sure. Now, once we've said that, obviously COVID-19 or whatever other virus that could come in the future will always be a challenge and requires a lot of effort and people dedication. And for that, I'm extremely happy our colleagues have stepped up to take on jobs and responsibilities and duties that they had never been really empowered before. We had, suddenly people in Taiwan with absolutely no experience stepping up to go and do the commissioning of the turbine, and that takes a lot of courage. So thanks to all the Vestas colleagues for that hard work. Then obviously the development, our customers, how do we see that? I don't see a lot of COVID impact. This is usually long cycles. You don't develop a wind farm in a couple of days, and 3 months doesn't have a huge impact. What I see having a lot more impact is how government could react to that situation. We see a lot more nationalistic behavior from some of those governments. Getting more and more protective, asking for local content, etc., etc. And I think this is what could slow down actually the activity, increasing cost of energy, etc. So I hope we're not going to go down that path. Thank you.
Thank you. No, very interesting. So I mean, maybe I'll sort of turn a similar sort of question, maybe more from the banking side. Jürgen, maybe you can jump in first.
Yeah, sure. And thank you very much for the question. I very much hope that COVID-19 will be a bump on the road when we look back in 2 years or 1 year. But we see that there are some issues and projects get a little bit delayed, and I think it's especially hitting the development of the projects. It's not so much the projects which have reached financial close. They are almost on track and finding the solution to solve the issues. But generally, the market view on Asia is, I think there is the political will in many countries to develop both onshore and offshore with a very high growth rate going forward. And we see a big pipeline in these countries. I very much agree what Vestas said, that it's the local contents and protectionism which might be the issues and could delay projects. And if a country wants to develop offshore wind and onshore wind, then the entrance into the market is that there is some cost, and to get local jobs, they have to show some predictability on the pipeline and the policy, and show that they want to do this going forward, and it's not just 1 year and then they get on pause and then there's no other projects. For the turbine manufacturers and the supply chain to establish in a country, they have to show a pipeline and some vision for long-term projects going forward. I think
Thanks, Jürgen. Sorry. Yeah. I think that covers what I was talking about. I mean, maybe staying with you a little. You touched on this in your presentation, but I think everyone's always keen to know what you'll see as the key issues for bankability for offshore wind, and it'd be interesting to understand if you see any particular differences between the three markets that we're talking about here. You know, Vietnam, Korea, and Japan. Any maybe key thoughts? Just keeping it relatively brief.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, as bankability of the PPA in Vietnam, we have not financed that on project finance yet, and we are very much looking into this PPA, and we very much hope that there will be some improvement in this PPA, so we can do project finance. The issues is arbitrage, curtailment, step-in rights, and cancellation, and regulation around grids. That's areas where we very much would like to see some improvements to do finance in Vietnam. But looking at the other markets, generally, we see that all the sponsors which have experience from Europe are moving to all the markets and opening up office, and we see Vestas and Siemens Gamesa are very active in the area. So I think there are definitely big possibilities going forward.
Thank you. So maybe just keeping on that topic, just bringing in Tommaso again. I mean, any particular thoughts from you from that side as well, from that more banking perspective?
From the well, of course, I totally agree with Jürgen that the bankability of PPA is exclusively Vietnamese problem, because Vietnam has no culture of project financing. They are very far away from giving confidence to the investor that they will not change their mind and the rules over time. And the investor in electricity does want to be sure that there's not going to be renegotiation of the tariffs. The financing of projects in Vietnam at the moment is largely done by the local banks. Local banks have brought up most of the investment in solar, and after COVID, they have been bleeding liquidity to support the survival of companies. So I am not sure they will be able to give as much money to wind farms next year as they have been able to give to solar farms last year. So this is an issue that does concern me over the speed of growth, provided that the FIT does have a happy solution. Because if it doesn't, then projects are just not going to be starting.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I'll probably change the topic a little bit now. Maybe going to Christoph from ACA. I think, you know, again, a theme in the questions is a little bit about, you know, what's the next step with floating, and I'd be keen to get your thoughts on, you know, how you see it evolving in parallel to floating, to fixed wind turbines, and, you know, any thoughts on maybe key differences, but also, you know, how do you see the price competition between the two technologies, and how that's going to evolve, and particularly maybe which markets do you see? Obviously, from your presentation, I think Korea was a focus, but yeah, please share your thoughts.
Yeah, Korea is definitely a focus, and I don't know if that was so clear in the presentation I've done of ACA offshore wind, but we're focusing both on bottom fixed, deeper than 60 meters, and floating. So we're definitely open at looking at the, let's say, complex bottom fixed projects involving heavy jackets, complex installations, and that's something that we're targeting with some core competence in jacket fabrication inside the ACA group of companies as well. So something that we've seen in the bottom fixed industry is that the cost would go down when the scale goes up, and that's something we are expecting to see in floating as well. So the market will grow, the scale of the projects will increase, and the costs will go down. And where we are extremely confident with floating is that there is a need for power and a need for green power in a lot of countries in the world where the water depth is much deeper than 60 meters. So that's where all the confidence on the growth of floating comes from. But we're still in the early days of this industry, of course. So I think one of the questions was regarding on-site repair, bottom fixed versus floating. I think, like I presented, the main challenge when replacing a blade or a heavy component offshore is really the motions of the vessel. So if we're looking at bottom fixed, we can reasonably expect that the vessels installing jackets or turbines on jackets will follow the market needs. So new jackup vessels will come on the market, and if Asia Pacific is matching the expectations we have, for sure there will be a fleet of jackup vessels being built there. So the main challenge we see now is the reduced availability of vessels, the reduced capacity for the next generation of turbines. But we should expect as well that the supply chain will follow, and that's something that Tony mentioned in his presentation as well. Like you see what the region lacks as of today, but in order to make this industry cost efficient, the supply chain will have to develop, and that will be done once like other presenters mentioned, I mean, once the projects are viable, are bankable, and that there's a good visibility of the pipeline of projects coming, then for sure when new companies will see the opportunities of business, the new vessels will come and the risk will go down.
Yeah. I mean, agreed. I think one of the topics that's been quite central to offshore wind is the vessels and availability. And it's been interesting actually, because obviously we're looking from the technical side and advising various participants. And I mean, it was always something that we followed closely in the North Sea as vessels became more and more specialized and available. But now it's interesting to see as well how, very early days in Taiwan, we were seeing this as one of the key challenges. But more and more now with that longer term vision, it's becoming less and less of an issue. Obviously still challenge, but yeah, I think, with Taiwan leading the way at the moment, and obviously the three other markets following, it's going to be interesting to see how Asia really ramps up for the likes of vessel availability and many other supply chain issues. So thanks for that. Yeah, very interesting. I will also open this up to Tony. I think very interesting again to get your thoughts maybe on the broad direction in Korea and how you see sort of floating versus fixed foundation coming through. What will come first and when, I guess. It'd be nice to just get your thoughts.
Okay. Actually, the government is planning very hard, and after 2017 announcement from the government, what we have done is that we get a bid from the local government. So we had problems with the approval and consent. So those issues that hindered the development of offshore wind farm. But if the local government bids the government that about the after solving all those issues, then that will be the industry will boost up very soon, and that will go for fixed bottom structures, and I think that will happen in 2 or 3 years. So we are hoping that in 2 or 3 years, the size of the capacity would go up to like 3 or 4 gigawatts, because Southwest, we have like 2 gigawatts, and in Shinan we have another 1.5 gigawatts planning. So that will be for fixed bottom, but at the same and also at the same time, we are doing floating in Ulsan, so which I think Christoph is also participating in, and from there, then they'll extend the market if it's successful to the eastern side of Korea, which is northern side of Japan. So we will just go in hand with other Asian markets for floating wind. So I think we have plans for 2030, but I think that's very challenging and like very I should say very big percentage. But still, I think if it's very realistic, if we could set it up to 10 or 15%, then we'll be able to construct those capacities in coming years in 2000 by 2030. So I think it's very bright for the bottom fixed and also the floating because it's very applicable. And in Korean market, I think it's more of a better solution than the bottom fixed.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll sort of keep the floating theme going on a little bit here, and maybe I could ask from PEC 3 if you have any thoughts on that. I mean, you've obviously been involved on some offshore works as per your presentation, but do you have any thoughts about floating in Vietnam? I mean, is this something that would happen, or maybe a bit later than the Northeast Asia markets? Sorry, yeah. So just trying to understand whether you see a market for floating wind in Vietnam. Yeah, if you have any thoughts on that, based on your involvement on the fixed bottom offshore wind.
What's the question? I cannot hear. Question is. Can you repeat clearly, please, Robin, again?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So just wondering, keeping on the floating offshore wind theme. Whether you see that floating offshore wind has a sort of place in Vietnam in the future, or whether you're going to see more fixed bottom based on your involvement so far?
At the moment, actually, we have no any initiatives for the wind power development in floating foundation with the 14 conditions. But it is forecasting that we have some capabilities in future if someone wants to do it. At the moment, we have no initiatives, honestly.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe just sort of rounding that off, the same question, but from the banker's side, Jürgen, maybe starting with you. Do you have any thoughts about maybe specific bankability challenges that you're worried about already, or?
Yeah, definitely. We are very much looking into floating, and where we see the market at the moment is that we see lots of demonstration projects in France and Norway and UK, and it is very costly at the moment, and we see, if we look at the models on these projects, then it's 2 to 3 times as expensive as doing a fixed bottom financing. So there is a huge cost in going that direction. But if you look at the markets like Korea and Japan, they are definitely going that direction, and we see very big ambitions on floating. And seeing from a risk point of view, we are told in the due diligence that we do that they are actually merging the technologies from oil and gas and then taking onshore turbines on this technologies. So the technology should be proved, and it should be definitely possible to do it, and we think that there is a big potential for these, but at the moment the main focus is still on fixed bottom, but we are exploring the possibilities, definitely.
Thanks. Yeah, Tommaso, maybe also letting you jump in on this if you have any thoughts. I think you're on mute.
For Vietnam, floating is still a bit futuristic. It's more expensive and technologically less tried. Also, there are questions about the usable area that Vietnam has available in the deep sea. So for the moment, what they've done is they have planned a lot of small fragmented plants, one next to each other, along the whole coast, without knowing exactly which one is going to be approved. The World Bank is leading an effort to do a region-wide infrastructure plan for the Mekong Delta, and hopefully that will also allow for transmission to be included in the equation, and also for a balance between the offshore wind and the offshore gas terminals that Vietnam will be building, given the intention to commit to buying a lot of gas from the United States for base load as well as political reasons.
Thank you. I'm sort of trying to get through some more questions, but I think I'm getting aware of the time. How are we doing for time, Brian?
I think we can finish at 4 p.m. like a 5-minute like Q&A question. I say there's some questions at Q&A box. You can have a look maybe.
Yes, so I've been trying to follow through them. Some of them are maybe more detailed and technical, so it's not easy to cover them all. There's an interesting one here. So if fishing is allowed in an offshore wind farm area, what are the protection measures for subsea cables? So maybe I could throw that one to Christoph first.
Yeah, sure. So if we're looking at onshore on bottom fixed wind farm, the cables will most likely be trenched, so protected, buried inside the seabed. Looking at floating, you do need the cables to go back up to the floater, so you will have a dynamic section of your inter-array cable, and this one you can't protect it against the fishing activities. So if fishing inside the wind farm is considered, we would need to have some corridors that are kind of safe for fishing with a reasonable distance from the subsea asset. But I think fishing in a floating wind farm where you have mooring lines coming from the seabed, cables going back up to the surface, will be more challenging and much more risky than anywhere else. So I think the question is not so much how we can do it, but what would be the risk of doing it. So I'm pretty sure we can come up with base case where like safe corridors where fishermen could work without damaging the product. But the question is after, during 25 years of operation, for example, how often would a damage happen and what would be the cost on the production? That's probably one of the biggest questions.
Thanks. Yeah, and maybe Tony, bring you in if you have anything to add on that. Particularly, how do the fishermen see this? What's your view from your research?
Actually, the main focus is if it's trenching, then there will be high possibility that the cables might be damaged. So like what we try to do is to do aquaculture there and with artificial reefs, and also even as far as I understand, even some European countries, like in Denmark, a few weeks ago we had discussion with them, and they are trying to discuss it with, and like come up with a solution that for offshore wind farm, you usually dig about like 2 meters to dig the cable in, right? But they're trying to increase the distance up to 4 to 5 meters, so that if that will be all difficult for developer, but still that will be very good for like stakeholders because they can do fishing inside. And also we have many safety measures that's being taken to do fishing inside offshore wind farm, because like in Korea, what we have is like 800 meters difference between the distance between the turbines, and it's only about like 400 to 500 meters that's available for fishing. And for other distances, we do surveillance, we do monitoring and everything to make sure that safety inside offshore wind farm is kept. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have, because like you never know until you actually do it. So like if there are any accidents or any events that happens, then we'll see like I think we'll amend the regulations and like the activities inside wind farm.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. Maybe one final question, William. I think I'll come to you on this one. I think a lot of the questions as well came around local content. Is that something you're able to just sort of briefly discuss for the 3 markets? Sort of what sort of requirements we're expecting, and I guess how will that be met?
Yeah, look, in Taiwan, there is a clear requirement for local content on the offshore side. There is no such requirement for the onshore turbines. And Taiwan has been doing that in a very smart way, giving long-term visibility to investors, coming with several rounds of auctions, significant size, which help both the developers and also the equipment manufacturers to really localize. But funnily enough, the last round of auctions, there was two ways. You could bid with a certain percentage of local content, and you would have, I would say, a premium on the tariff, or you could also bid with imported equipment. And all the result is that basically the tariffs with imported equipment are half the price. You saw a drop from 13 to 14 cents per kilowatt hour to 8 or 9. So that shows the difference. So obviously I can understand from a country perspective that they want some local content. I think that actually it's the wrong debate. Where you are creating value is not on the equipment manufacturing side. You're really creating jobs with all the maintenance and the installation and everything, the jobs which are actually to build the project and then to operate it for 20 years. By allowing imported equipment and reducing the price, you're unable to scale it much further without putting a burden on the taxpayers. So that's a little bit the lessons just from Taiwan, but you can see the glass half full, or you can see the glass half empty. In Korea, they decided to see it where there should be a local content requirement. It's not yet published, but I know that the authorities have been discussing that for quite some time, and they will be pushing for a certain percentage of local content for the offshore. For the onshore, there's not enough scale. I mean, the market is 200 megawatt. You would kill completely the onshore market with this kind of requirements. Japan has has had local content. They had local manufacturers also locally. There's not much left right now. It's just too expensive in Japan to produce wind turbines. So they have a pragmatic approach where they say, well, the value is on the maintenance, etc. And Vietnam, look, it hasn't been on the table. I would not be surprised, to be very honest with you, that the large offshore projects, the Tan Long, and there is a couple of others, and you're talking of 3 gigawatt project. I would not be surprised that obviously the developers would, of course, eventually promote some portion of local content to the government in order to get a PPA. But if I look at what we've done on the nearshore projects, which we are building now in the Mekong Delta, you know, you look at the wind turbine itself, which is imported. The imported equipment portion is actually less than 30% of the total EPC cost of the project. It's really peanuts. The rest and the towers. First, we manufacture the towers in Vietnam already. We have a supplier there that build towers, steel towers for our turbines. Then all the foundations, everything, the barges, everything is local. The transport equipment, all the subcontractors. Vietnam has a good also local industry, transformers, cables. So you can source lots of things from Vietnam, and that already makes for a huge local content without having a need for actually putting a rule and forcing, because we will do it if it makes sense. And it makes sense in Vietnam to source locally because there is, well, good and competitive suppliers.
Great, thank you, William. Very good thoughts there. Okay, I think, Brian, I've probably gone slightly over what you said, so maybe back to you and you can close up. Maybe just on the Q&A, apologies if I've not been able to cover everyone's questions. Hopefully we've covered most of them. But if you have any specific questions, I think it's fair to suggest you reach out to the panelists directly after the session. I'm sure they'll be willing to discuss with you.
Well, thank you, our panel moderator, Robin, and our speaker, Jochen, Mr. Ngô Kim Gong, Mr. Chaluka, William, Christopher, and Tony. Thank you for your support. Without you, our webinar will not successful. And so, because time is up, I need to close our webinar. Before that, because our office is based in Ho Chi Minh market, we already saw what is happening. For example, last month, August 28th, there's a workshop by MOIT, the Ministry of Industry and Trade. There's news showed that they will submit the National Power Development Plan 8 at the end of September to the Prime Minister, to the higher level government. So let's see what's happening. And I believe the Power Development Plan 8 will answer many questions for Vietnam market. After that, like our next event is for Vietnam market, the third Vietnam Onshore and Offshore Wind Summit, October 20 to 21, is also a chance to get a deep dive to understand the Vietnam market. So that's our conclusion, and thank you very much for all our participants and our speakers, and hopefully could see all of you October 20 to 21. Yeah, okay. Thank you for your time. Any question, please send me email. And regarding the recording, and later on we will upload to YouTube. Regarding the presentation, we will ask the approval from speaker first before we sharing. So I will need to ask approval for all of us, all of you. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. I will end our meeting. See you next time. Yeah. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.